Well,
perfect. There we are. Second.
Okay.
I think it's okay. Can everyone see me?
Just put the phone in the middle because otherwise it will wait.
Okay, great. Thank you. Much appreciated. Perfect. Perfect. Amazing.
Put some silent as well.
No, they can hear me. Danny can hear me. No, Danny can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear. Thank you, Rabbi.
Excellent. Fine, let's go. Sorry.
For a minute, I was worried Daniel was giving this.
Sorry. No, Daniel says he's not giving the share. It's fine. It's just using his phone. Okay, good. Right. Without further ado, because it's a busy enough parsha, let's try and get through some ideas.
Be gracious as well.
Just I think Noach is long enough. Yeah, Noach is long enough. Okay, so understanding. We're kind of broadly speaking, the theme of the shir really is to try and understand Noach and Avraham, what I think is a beautiful mahalach of beautiful idea of Rav Dessler in how to understand and the key distinction between them. Many Meforshim talk about this, but he's got, I think, something which has a really vital message for us. But just to begin with a relatively brief kliyakar at the very beginning of the parsha. So the kliyakar says, let me just find it. So the question is, why is it that it mentions specifically here the tzidkus of Noach, the righteousness of Noach, Noach ish tzaddik, Tomim hoya b'deros? We mentioned Noach previously. This is the kliyakar's question on Rashi. Rashi famously says, we mention him, therefore we talk about how great he was. It says the kliyakar, according to this, it should have mentioned it at the end of Bereshis because he's mentioned there as well. So that's a basic question on Rashi. So he says the answer is like this, that because it starts here with the word Eila, which means that it's something brand new, right? Eila, we always understand, is posal esorishonim. It means there's a separation, it's distinct, it's disqualified, so to speak, that which has gone previously. And the message there is that the Toldos, the generations of those who went before Noach, they're not called Toldos because they were all going to perish. That was the whole thing that was going to happen with the Mabul. These were called, what he says is Toldos Kayomim. These were the lasting generations. And therefore he says, that's why there's a need to here specifically understand why it is that these ones were left. Why was it that that Noach and his generation survived? And on that, the answer is because Noach is tzaddik tomim hoya b'deros, so because of the fact that he merited it in terms of his righteousness, and that is why it's specifically here that this is emphasized here. He also says, he brings another important idea here. Where is it? Yeah, the next kliyakar, also on the same pasuk Yud, he says, Ish tzaddik tomim hoya b'derosov. Lefisha dora mabel. It's a very brief point, very brief few lines. Lefisha dora mabel ishchisu is even b'shlosha minei hashchosish niskor parsha, because they did these three things wrong. The three things that are mentioned: avodah zarah, gilui arayos, and gezel, idolatry, immorality, and theft. Al kain hiktim loymar shenoach goder b'shloshtam. Therefore, that's why it says first that Noach was someone who was he refrained from these three areas. He was particularly careful about these three areas. Ki ish tzaddik, because he was a tzaddik. He didn't steal from anyone else. Tomim hoya b'derosov. So in other words, ish tzaddik means, what does it mean to be a tzaddik? That means theft. He was a tzaddik, he didn't steal. You're going to say that's not such a tzaddik, right? So we'll come back to that, right? Tomim hoya b'derosov, what does it mean? He was tomim, he was complete. The word tomim we associate with bris milah. Next week's parsha, Ram Avinu is told, be tomim. What does it mean to be tomim? To be mohel. So therefore, that's the association already with immorality, in the sense that he protected himself in that way. He was careful in that way. And so it's a very simple idea, exactly. But it's a beautiful shot in the pasuk. These three things, the three attributes of Noach, are each one corresponds to and if you like negates the specific things that the Dor HaMabul did wrong, right? Obviously, the Dor HaMabul parts together Shlosh, and they breached all these three areas. So what we already see from the Kliyoko, which is an idea which we're going to come back to when we try and understand what Rav Dessler says, is the sense that Noach's primary trait is effectively to do the right thing, and that's what's really interesting about Noach, in the sense that if you had to describe a tzaddik, you wouldn't say he doesn't steal, right? You would say a tzaddik. What's a tzaddik? A tzaddik is someone who goes out of his way to do something that no one else will do. It doesn't say that. Noach is tzaddik. He doesn't steal. He doesn't commit immorality. All these things. That's what he does. He protects the boundaries he is supposed to protect. He does the right thing, right?
It's almost because of how bad that generation was.
Yeah.
Not stealing made them.
Exactly right. You could take it that way, 100%, and that would fit with, which maybe also will come back to the idea of B'dorosov, that Pshat and B'dorosov, the two different explanations, in the sense that if it was B'dorosov, can either be the Shvach or Ignai, the fact that he compared to everyone else, he was a great tzaddik, but compared to Avraham Avinu, as we know, he wasn't, right? But this idea of boundaries is very important. Now, so to just hold that idea, we'll come back to that. The Meshech Chochmah says, again, it's just a short piece in the Meshech Chochmah, and he says like this. He says, Ikar HaNisoyim, the primary challenge, the primary test, Shel Kol HaNivroim, all those who were created, was Hoya Hestapkus for Kabbalas Morris Minoach Obonov. Their primary test, their primary Nisoyim that they had to undergo was to accept the authority of Noach and his children. That was their main challenge. That was the main challenge they had. Interesting way of looking at the parsha. In other words, if they had been able to understand that Noach was on the right path, I think this is what he means, and that he had authority over them in the sense that he had moral authority over them, because Hashem had said, "You're doing the right thing, everyone else is doing the wrong thing," they would have been able to pass that test, and potentially others would have been able to jump on the bandwagon or the ship wagon, right? But they didn't, right? Cain is now, but what was Noach's challenge? Cain is sign shall Noach ha'amal v'hasavlonus lekalkal kol minim shonim v'ikal kolosom. His trouble, his difficulty was to be able to sustain everything in the right way and to bear lispol tirdosom marshalo yeshua b'seichel. In other words, he had to bear the troubles and the difficulties that he famously had in the teva, even though it was almost irrational. It was almost impossible to do what he had to do to look after everything in the table, the animals and everything else. But that was something that he had to do. And he says that that when it comes to the concept of bechira, he says, and he brings the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, the fact that obviously HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows, Yedias Hashem Yisbarach Eina Machriach HaBechira, but Yedias, that doesn't change the Bechira. Obviously Hashem knows what's going to happen. Hashem, there's a lot, that's a big subject in and of itself in terms of free will and choice and everything else, and determination. He says that doesn't affect Noach's free will. What would have affected Noach's free will would be his own knowledge. Yedias HaNivroim Machriach. If Noach knew, right, that Hashem considered him a tomim, someone who was complete and would always do the right thing, if you like, using that word tomim specifically, because he says, he brings a Gemara that tomim is tomim bidrochov, tomim in his ways, tzaddik is b'maisov in his actions. And Rashi says there, I think on the Gemara, that being tomim bidrochov, being complete and wholesome in his ways, is specifically this midah of anova, humility and savlonus, like patience, and being able to bear even an incredibly difficult circumstance and situation, right? So he tells something very clever with the psukim here. Had Noach been aware that Hashem considered him a tomim, meaning humble and able to bear things as savlonus, so then that would taken away his free will. Then it would be, he says, and that's why Hashem did not tell him that he was a tomim. And that is why, says that Meshech Chochmah, you find at the beginning of the parsha is called Ish Tzadik Tomim, because the Torah is describing Ish Tzadik Tomim. And then later on, Vayomer Elokim L'Noach, right? Where is it? Zion. No, one second. No. Later on. Yeah. The beginning, paragraph Zion, Pasuk Yud Aleph. Okay. Pasuk Aleph, sorry. Pasuk Aleph, right? It doesn't say Tomim. He's not referred to, Hashem doesn't address him as a Tomim. Hashem doesn't address him as Tomim. Hashem addresses him as a tzaddik. Because tzaddik, he was righteous in his actions, didn't steal, right? He was a tzaddik, right? Like, if you learn like the Kliyaka, right? Didn't steal, he was righteous in his actions. But Tomim is like a character trait. You know, you're wholesome, you're complete in every way. You've got that mid of humility, of anov and so on. If Hashem had called him that, then he would have taken away his free will, because he would know. I know that sounds a bit, if Hashem is addressing you directly, Hashem says, right, you can, you have this midah, to some extent, that would remove his whole free choice. So Hashem preserves that. It doesn't tell him that he's a Tomim, so that he can pass that test properly, and he would still retain his Bechira, his free choice in the Teva, if you like.
Does Hashem ever give any compliments to Moshe or to any of the other?
There are in certain ways, right? He's called Onov Mikol Adam, right? It's humble. So it'd be very interesting if you could trace that theme through the rest of the Torah. It's a fascinating idea, the idea that if Hashem tells someone directly, you are X, Y, Z, the idea that then removes their Bechira, it's an amazing idea. It's something which I certainly hadn't thought of in that context. That's how he understands it with Noach. Noach would have looked. So Noach has to retain his Bechira, right? And that's what happens. And his Bechira is this midah of Tomim, is in doing the right thing. Now, Rav Dessler, to come on to the idea of Rav Dessler here, says that we have to understand famously, of course, that difference between Noach and Avram Avinu. He says that the essence of what the Dor HaMabul did wrong, right, as we know, was to chomos, the concepts of violence, it's all breaking boundaries. There's another kliyakar, which we've learned in the past, I think, where he talks about how each of the three averos are all breaching boundaries. Again, which corresponds to what we said before about Noach. Noach retains boundaries. He doesn't steal. He keeps to his own. He doesn't breach immorality, so he doesn't go beyond what he's supposed to have in that area, etc., etc. Same with Avodah Zarah, right? All the other three are these three averos are all ways in which you break a boundary. So you steal someone else's stuff. You take someone else's wife. You understand? All these things that's what they are. They are breaking those boundaries. That's what the violence is, taking, right? What does Noach have to do? Noach's test and the way he survives the Mabul is through chesed, through giving. It's all giving. So it's not just that Noach has to be on the Teva and he has to look after animals because there's no one else to do it. It's not that at all. It's that's the only way he can survive the Mabul. It's a much deeper level. Do you see what I mean? It's not just like you're the only one alive, so therefore you're going to have to look after them. It's no. If you want to survive the Mabul, you have to do something which is so much the opposite of why they're all perishing. Yeah, that will give you a zuchus to survive.
You have to actively do it. It's not back
exactly.
in the past, it's present.
Exactly. You are actively doing that now, so that every moment in the Teva, Noach is living, right, the notion of giving. That's what he's doing the whole time. I think it really changes your understanding of the parsha, because when you, again, like so many parshas and bereshis, you learn it when you're very young, and then you continue learning, and you stay learning it the way, and you have to learn it that way. I've discussed this in the past. You have to start learning bereshis as you learned it in Cheder, right? But you need to progress every year. You should try and progress. As we get older, we should try and deepen our understanding. So when we're young, we learn about Noach getting attacked by the lion and everything else, and the way he has to run around. He spends the whole time in the table, and that absolutely, emes, that's what he did. But let's understand why. Let's understand why does Noach have to live a life like that, right? Why can't it be easier? Why can't Hashem is saving him from the Mabbles? He can save him in another way. Why is it, can provide all the food and he doesn't have to feed them? The answer is because it has to be ultimate giving chesed for these tens of thousands of living things in the Teva. And that's how he survives the Mabul, okay? And it's continuously, it's the whole year. That's what he's doing, right? Now, says Rav Dessler like this, and he goes on. He this is sort of summarizing a big piece. He says, that's the tsoyhar. What is the? There's a machlokas where the tsoyhar and the taver is the window. It's a precious stone. So if you say it's a precious stone, he says that's the light. the light of the teva is the chesed, right? Is the chesed? It becomes a vehicle, a vessel, which is entirely chesed, and therefore it's floating around in the mabul, which is destroying those who were the antithesis of giving and took. It's all about taking. That's what it is, right? Molah haaretz chomos. Chomos is violence. It's taking. It's he brings that unculus. If you look at unculus on Targum unculus on the word, second, yeah. If you look at unculus on the end of Pasuk Yud Aleph, so the Targum says, right? Vatimolei haaretz chomos. The Ismailias ara chotoifin. Lachtoif is to snatch. Right, it's to take. That's what the chomos is. It's to take, right? It's which fits with Gezel, obviously, right? You know, yeah. You find the same thing with as Rashi brings. Yeah, Rashi says Gezel, and Rashi brings. There's a Sforim Acherim in Rashi. There's another text in Rashi where it brings the pasuk in Yonah. That means what happens with Yonah. With Yonah, he's sent to Nineveh. And there you find that that was what they were doing. They were doing these type of acts. That's the way they were behaving. It's the same thing, right? So that was what it is. It was all the power of taking. Noach has to contradict that, and that is why when Noach is a few minutes late in bringing the food to the lion, right? Why is it so bad? Like he's working really hard. Okay, so he's a few minutes late. Why does the lion cripple him? Right? Why is he attacked by the lion just because it's a few minutes late? Says Rav Dessler, because that was a crippling blow to the whole endeavor. Chesed now, at this moment during this year, was so incredibly critical to the whole mission that any sort of pagam in it, anything that's a kind of bit deficiency that happens, it's like it's blown completely. The whole thing is the whole mission is at stake. Okay, so that's what happens. That is what happens with Noach, right? Now,
how do you interpret idolatry as being taking? That's almost the vehicle that creates the taking, because you take away.
I think this is something which I think the Kli Yakar deals with in Pasuk Yud Zayin. He says. He mainly deals with Gezel. But I think it's straightforward because what effect then it's in the name Avodah Zarah. So it's the greatest breaching of boundaries in the sense that Hashem created the world, and you're going along and finding some inanimate object, and you're saying this created the world. So you're breaking the very the very foundation of what of existence and how you should interpret the one. You're breaking that boundary, saying no, something else. The power is somewhere else, not where it actually is. So that's the simplest way of understanding it. That's what I've understood it. So now, what we know that there was one place, says Rav Dessler, that the Mabul posed no danger at all. That was Eretz Yisrael, right? There's a Gemara about this, right? Eretz Yisrael wasn't affected by the Mabul, right? There's a whole discussion about that, and there's a whole Gemara, I think, about that, right? Now, the question is, what was the difference between Noach and Avram Avinu, right? So Noach in the Teva is sowing extreme chesed to animals. But the difference between what Noach does and Avram Avinu does is that Noach is chesed within what his duty is. It's always his duty. For Noach, chesed is a duty. And it's extreme chesed, right? But he does it because that's his duty. His duty is, Hashem has given me this mission to look after the animals in the Teva, right? And it's a cosmic mission. It's the saving of all of humanity, right? But it's what Hashem has told me to do.
It doesn't sit right then with the fact that we spoke about before about the Bechira side of things. Then he needed to do the chesed.
Because that's his test. He's still his Messiah. So it's not like it's easy. It's not easy because it's still a massive challenge for him. But you'll see the difference with Avram Avinu, right? Why doesn't it sit quite with Bechira?
No, because you said before, if he was doing it only because he had to do it, which is what you just said, he was doing it because it was a duty, then it wasn't true. wasn't ultimate chesed, so to speak.
Not necessarily. No, okay, it's fair to say it's not ultimate chesed, maybe, and we'll get on to the understand why Avraham Avinu is different, right? That's a fair point, but it's still even if you have a duty, it's still a huge nisayon. So the bechira point is just how to retain the sense that he has a choice. Otherwise, there's no bechira there. Noach has to have a bechira the whole way through, right? So although the fact is, though, his chesed is summed up by doing a duty. That's what Noach is. But he's not upset at a missed opportunity. He's not upset at a missed. He does exactly what's required of him, and he does that the whole way through the parsha. Whatever's required of him, he does. He does things wrong as well. Whatever. We're not going into it. But at the end of the day, that's what he does. That's his level of chesed. Okay. Says Rav Dessler, a person who does what they are required to do, and they have a duty to do, is a tzaddik. So tzaddik. That's what tzaddik is. Tzidkus is to do the right thing. Okay. You cannot be a chosid there. A chosid is someone, right, as in pious, is someone who is supremely devoted to chesed and goes to look for chesed where it doesn't exist. That's what a chosid is. That's what a chosid is. And he says that when it comes to Avraham Avinu, what does Avram do? Exactly the whole way through the story of Avram, you find him looking for opportunities. He sits outside his tent. He looks for an opportunity to do chesed. That's what he wants. That is what he's looking for. Okay, I mean, he doesn't bring this, but also you see the way he davens for Sodom, the same thing, right? No one is telling him to do that, right? He's got a job, he's got a mission, he's busy founding a nation, everything else. Well, Sodom was like a side story, like the whole episode there is an incredible thing, right? What's he getting involved with Sodom for? Like, stay on the path, stick on the mission, right?
Save his nephew.
What?
He wants to save his nephew.
Yeah, but he doesn't. But he sticks his neck out for the. He sticks his neck out for the town, right? For the whole. Okay, and he doesn't bring that example. It just occurred to me that's another example of it. The primary example, of course, is with the malachim outside the tent, right? The fact that he is someone who looks for chesed. He looks to do chesed even when chesed doesn't exist. Now, let me just find what he says. Now, what he says is, therefore, right? He says the whole machlokus, whether Noach was a tzaddik and his generation, or he wasn't a tzaddik, would have been a tzaddik now, and the fact that he would have been Avraham Avinu's tzaddik he would have been great. So he says there's no actual machlokus. He says the point in both opinions is that if he had lived in the time of Avraham Avinu, he would have been clearly a much greater tzaddik, because Avraham would have influenced him. Avraham would have raised his tzidkus to a higher level, right? That's shvach on the one hand, because he must have great potential that he could be raised higher. But on the other hand, it's also true that had he lived in the time of Avraham Avinu with the potential unrealized, then he would not have counted for anything compared to Avraham Avinu, right? But he's trying to get to the point here that everyone agrees that what Noach did and what Noach was a tzaddik. The Torah describes him as a tzaddik. We always struggle with this when we learn this medrash, right? Or this chazal, because we say he wouldn't learn an echshav leklum. He wouldn't have been considered anything, but he did a huge amount, and he was saved the whole world because of him. So he says, and he brings also as well, he brings another medrash Tanchuma, which says that he is compared to everyone else in the Torah whose name is repeated. Avraham, Medrash Tanchuma says, Avraham, right? It says, Yaakov, Moshe. All these people are the same. So it says, with Noach as well, so that he's equated with other tzaddikim. So if that says, you see clearly that the bottom line is that Noach is a tzaddik, right? But what Noach is not is a chosid, because the chosid is someone, a tzaddik is someone who does absolutely what he's required to do. He takes a tiny bit more that he's not entitled to. He's not a tzaddik anymore, right? What does Avraham Avinu do? Avraham Avinu, we see in a number of areas, beyond the fact that he does chesed beyond what he's required to do. His name is changed. Avram becomes Avraham. Why? Because he is broadening his horizons. He starts off as Avram, just of one nation, Av La'aram, and he becomes Avraham, Av Hamoin Goyim. because he's someone who is not content. Avram, his entire existence, his entire life is defined by not being content with duty, but wanting to do more beyond duty. And that's why he sits outside the tent, waits for the malachim. And that's why he becomes Avraham, because he's not happy just to sit and say, oh, I've got one nation, that's enough. No, he wants to become Avraham, right? So therefore, he says, that is why. What is Avraham Avinu? And this is really the most beautiful bit of the whole thing. What does Avraham Avinu get? Lech lecha me'aretzcha to where? To Eretz Yisrael. He gets Eretz Yisrael. He gets the one place where the Mabul doesn't exist. That's the one place where Tomid Eine Hashem Elokecha Ba, where Hashem is always present. The ultimate manifestation of Hashem's chesed beyond any boundaries, beyond any limits, is in Eretz Yisrael, right? It's always there. It is always, Hashem is, Eretz Yisrael represents that sense of continual chesed all the time, over and above, if you like, duty. That's what it means. Tomed Ein Hashem Elokecha Ba. There's no, it's not a sense of being, it's a sense of Hashem's presence always being there. And therefore, the difference between, he says, Noach and Avraham is like this. Noach needs to experience the Mabul, and he's therefore trained in the Teva, in the art of Chesed. He needs to undergo that training. That's what happens. But it's always a training of duty. He's a tzaddik. The whole way through, he's a tzaddik, but he has to undergo that training. And he misses it once, things get seriously messed up. And he has to experience the Mabul. And Noach is a tzaddik, equal to other tzaddikim. But in the Dor of Avraham Avinu, in the midah of extending beyond the concept of being a chassid, he wouldn't have come close to Avraham Avinu. And that is why, when it comes to Avraham Avinu, because he has that midah within him, Hashem says, I will take you to a place, right, where the Mabul doesn't even exist. You don't have to undergo what Noach went through. You don't have to go through a Mabul and demonstrate how you're different and experience chesed in a different, practice chesed, if you like, in a different vein, to train yourself not to be like that. You're in a place where the Mabul doesn't even exist, because you can live in a place. You can live in a place where chesed is something which is automatic. It's beyond and above any sense of rationality. He says. That's right. He says the only person, he says it's only someone who is on the level of completely selfless chesed can see the continual chesed of Hashem. Noach wouldn't have been able to see it, so he wouldn't have been able to experience it. Avraham Avinu was on a level where, because he lived like that sense of continual chesed above and beyond, he could go to Eretz Yisrael, he could experience that from Hashem himself. That's the idea of, that is the idea that he, that Rav Dessler expresses. There is more, but we don't really have time to go through it. I'll just share with you one very, very final idea from the Torah, which is connected to this, I think. But this doesn't bring this. The posuk in Haftorah, that means that's why we learn this in Haftorah, the Hashem says, I made an oath never to bring Mei Noach again. It'll never be a flood again. So too, I made a shvur not to be angry with you, not to, etc., etc. The next pasuk says, even if the mountains will be removed and they will be dissolved, the whole existence will be dissolved, whatever the mountains are, the high hills, the high mountains, the lows, the low hills. My kindness from you will never be removed. And the covenant of my peace will never falter, says the one who is merciful to you, Hashem. So the Malbim says, beyond the shvur not to bring, the oath never to bring a Mabul again, Mosif Lomar, ki lo levad shekosh alai l'chalos u'schar, kamesh kosh alai l'chalos olam. Not only is it difficult for me to destroy you, so to speak, as it is difficult for me to bring a Mabul, as I won't bring a Mabul again on the world. Ki gamim yitzua, he says, even if I have a reason, Hashem says, for some reason, to retract or to cancel the shvur of not to bring a Mabul, and there would be a Mabul again, my kindness from you will never be lost, will never be removed. And I think, and again, if it doesn't bring this is exactly the point. This is exactly the idea that we bring out the difference in Noach and Avram Avinu, because Avram Avinu symbolizes chesed, that it's illogical and it's beyond any boundaries, and it's not duty. It's something I've gone looking for and I found. So Hashem says, even if there was the case where I would have to bring a marble again, my kindness will never be removed from you, because Avram Avinu finds HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And he exists in a world that is chesed beyond any logic. That's what Avram Avinu lives for, right? That's what he does. That's what he does, you know. That is why he becomes what he becomes. And it could be that that's shut in that pasuk in Haftarah. Hashem says, so too, I would always look after you. My chesed will always be there towards you, as Avram Avinu always had chesed and went looking for it even when it wasn't there. Anyway, that's hopefully some ideas you can share with Shabbos. Thank you for joining, everyone.
That's the what we say. Oh no.
Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Shkar. Shabbos. Very nice. Remember,